Okay, alright, so I realized that I forgot to hit record. But you know what? We're rolling with it. It's good water. So, Scarlet met Ron on the train. The train was forced to come, come to a stop, but quarantining because of leishmaniasis, supposedly. And we're here on chapter 19. Wolf and Scarlet are in the jungle. There's a town 20 miles east that they have to get to. But there's also wild wolves in the forest that may or may not eat them. Anyway. Chapter 19. What is all this junk? Cinder locked her jaw, straining to push a plastic crate that was almost as tall as she was. Thorn grunted beside her. It's not junk! The tendons in his neck bulged as the crate collided with the cargo bay wall. Thorn tossed his arms over the top with a groan, and Cinder collapsed against it. Her shoulders ached, as tense as the metal that made up her left leg, and her arms felt like they were about to fall off. But when she allowed herself to look around the cargo bay, a sense of accomplishment settled around her. All the crates had been slid to the walls, clearing an actual path from the cockpit to the living quarters. The smaller, lighter ones had been stacked on top of one another, and some were left out as makeshift furniture in front of the main net screen. It bordered on cozy. The next job would be to actually unpack the crates, the ones that were worth unpacking, but that would be a job for another day. No, really, she said when she'd found her breath. What is all this? Thorn slid down beside her and wiped his brow with his sleeve. I don't know, he said, eyeing the stamped labels on the side of the nearest crate in unhelpful code. Supplies? Food? I think there are some guns in one of them, and I know I had a few sculptures from this really collectible secondary artist. I was going to make a fortune off of them, but I got arrested before I had a chance. Cinder squinted at him. Sure that the sculptures were stolen, she found it difficult to muster any sympathy. Shame, she muttered, thumping her head back against the crate. Thorn pointed at something on the far wall, his forearm jutting beneath Cinder's nose. What's that? She followed his gesture, frowned, and with a cranky moan pushed herself back to her feet. The corner of a metal frame could be seen behind a tall stack of crates they'd left against the wall. A door. She drew up the ship's blueprint on her retina display. The medbay? Realization brightened Thorn's face. Oh, right. The ship does have one of those. Cinder settled her fists on her hips. You covered up the medbay? Thorn pulled himself up. Never needed it. Don't you think it might be good to have access to it just in case? Thorn shrugged. We'll see. Rolling her eyes, Cinder reached for the uppermost crate and hauled it down onto the floor, already disrupting their hard-worn pathway. How can we be sure there's nothing in these boxes that can be tracked? What do you think I am, an amateur? Nothing entered this ship without being thoroughly inspected. Otherwise, the Republic would have reclaimed it a long time ago, rather than let it idle in that warehouse. There may not be any trackers, said Aiko, making Cinder and Thorn both jump. They still weren't used to their invisible, omnipresent companion. But we can still be detected on radar. I'm doing my best to keep us out of the path of any satellites or ships, but it's surprisingly crowded up here. Thorn unrolled his sleeves. And it's next to impossible to re-enter Earth's atmosphere without detection. That's how they nabbed me last time. I thought there was a trick to it, said Cinder. I'm sure I once heard about a way people could sneak into Earth's atmosphere without notice. Where did I hear that? News to me. I got pretty good at sweet-talking my way into public hangars, but I don't think that's going to work with such a high-profile convict on the loose. Having found an old rubber band in the galley, Cinder fished it from her pocket and tossed her hair up in a ponytail. Her brain ticked through her memories until, with a snap, it came to her. Dr. Erlond had told her that there were more Lunars on Earth than people suspected, and that they had a way of getting to Earth without the government taking notice. Lunars know how to cloak their spacecrafts. Huh? She pulled herself from the daze, blinking at Thorn. Lunars can cloak their spacecrafts, keep Earthen radars from picking up on them. That's how so many are able to make it to Earth, if they manage to get away from Luna in the first place. That's terrifying, said Aiko, who had acknowledged the truth of Cinder's race much as she'd acknowledged Thorn's convict status, with loyalty and acceptance, but without changing her opinion that Lunars and convicts remain untrustworthy and unredeemable as a general rule. Cinder had not yet figured out how to tell her that she also happened to be the missing Princess Celine. I know it is, said Cinder, but it would be awfully convenient if I knew how they did it. Do you think it's with their... Thorn rolled his wrist toward her. Crazy lunar magic stuff? Bioelectricity, she said, quoting Dr. Erland. Calling it magic only empowers them. Whatever. I don't know. It could be some special technology they install on their ships. Optimistically hoping it's magic, maybe you should start practicing? Cinder bit the inside of her cheek. Start practicing what? I guess I can try. Turning her attention back to the crate, she pulled up the lid and was met with a box of packing chips. She stuffed her metal hand into it and emerged with a tiny wooden doll bedecked in feathers and painted with 6 eyes. What is this? Venezuelan dream doll. It's hideous. It's worth about 12,000 univs. Heart skipping, Cinder lowered the doll back into the protective packing. Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out who's reading at this point, or who's talking. You don't think you might have something useful in all of these? Like, I don't know, a fully charged power cell? Doubtful, said Thorn. How much longer will ours hold out? Aiko chimed. Approximately 37 hours. Thorn gave Cinder a thumbs up. Plenty of time to learn a new lunar trick, right? Cinder shut the crate's lid and slid it back against the others, trying not to show panic at having to use her new gift for anything. Much less something as huge as disguising a cargo ship. In the meantime, I'll do a little research. Try to determine... Oh. Yeah, no, I had that right. In the meantime, I'll do a little research. Try to determine the best place for us to land. Not the Commonwealth, obviously. I hear Fiji's nice this time of year. Or Los Angeles, Aiko practically saying. They have a huge escort droid outlet store there. I wouldn't mind having an escort droid body. Some of the newer models come with color-changing fiber optic hair. Aiko, you're a gem. Don't ever change. Cinder slumped onto the floor again and scratched at her wrist. A tick that was becoming awkward now that she had no gloves to fiddle with. We're not landing a stolen American ship in the American Republic, she said, fixing her attention on the net screen, where her own prison picture hovered in the corner. She was so sick of that picture. Do you have any suggestions? Said Thorn. Africa. She heard herself saying it, but nothing came out. That's where they were supposed to go. That's where she was supposed to go. To meet Dr. Erland, so he could tell her what to do next. He had plans for her. Plans to make her a hero, a savior, a princess. Plans to overthrow Lavanna and instate Cinder as the true queen. Her right hand started to shake. Dr. Erland had set up the cyborg draft and treated dozens, perhaps hundreds of cyborgs like throwaways. All for the sake of finding her. And then, when he found her, he kept the secret of her identity until he had no other choice but to tell her, all the while planning out the rest of her life. He made this need for revenge the highest priority. But what the doctor hadn't considered was that Cinder had no desire to be queen. She didn't want to be a princess or an heir to anything. All her life, at least all the life she could remember, all she'd ever wanted was freedom. And now, for the first time, she had it. However tenuous it was. There was no one telling her what to do, no one to judge or criticize. But if she went to Dr. Erland, she would lose all that. He would expect her to reclaim her rightful place as Queen of Luna, and that struck her as the most binding shackles of all. Cinder gripped her shaking hand with the steady cyborg one. She was tired of everyone deciding her life for her. She was ready to figure out who she really was, not what anyone else told her to be. Cinder? Europe. She pressed her back into the crate, forcing herself to sit straight, to feign certainty. We're going to Europe. A brief silence. Any reason in particular? She met his gaze and pondered a long moment before choosing her words. Do you believe in the lunar air? Thorn propped his chin on both palms. Of course. No, I mean, do you believe she's still alive? He peered at her as if she were being cute. Because it was so vague the first time. Yes, of course I think she's alive. Cinder drew back. You do? Sure. I know some people think it's all conspiracy theories, but I've heard that Queen Lavanna was really paranoid for months after that fire, when she should have been ecstatic, because she was the finally queen, right? It's like she knew the princess had gotten away. Yeah, but those could only be stories, Cinder said, not knowing why she was trying to dissuade him. Perhaps because she'd never believed any of it, until she'd known the truth. He shrugged. What does this have to do with Europe? Cinder shifted to face him more fully, crisscrossing her legs. There's a woman who lives here, or at least she used to live there. She used to be in their military. Her name is Michelle Benoit. Cinder just named Scarlet's grandma. All right, we're seeing traction. Her name is Michelle Benoit, and I think she might be connected to the missing princess. She took in a slow breath, hoping she hadn't said anything that could give her secret away. Where did you hear this? An android told me. A royal android. Oh, Kai's android! Aiko said, excitedly changing the screen to one of Kai's fan pages. Cinder sighed. Yes, His Majesty's android. Unbeknownst to her at the time, her cyborg brain had recorded every word that the android, Nancy, had spoken, as if it had known that Cinder would someday need to draw on this information again. According to Nancy's research, a lunar doctor named Logan Tanner had brought Cinder to Earth when she was still a child, after Lavanna's murder attempt had failed. He had eventually been incarcerated in a psychiatric hospital and committed suicide, but not before passing her off to someone else. Nancy had thought that someone else was an ex-military pilot from the European Federation. Wing Commander Michelle Benoit. A royal android, Thorn said, showing the first sign of speculation. And how did it get this information? That I have no idea, but I want to find this Michelle Benoit and see if I was right. See if it was right. And hope that Michelle Benoit had some answers that Dr. Erland didn't. Erland didn't. Perhaps she could tell Cinder about her history, about those 11 long years lost to her memory, about her surgery, and the surgeons, and Lynn Garen's invention that had kept Cinder from using her lunar gift until Dr. Erland had disabled it. Perhaps she had her own ideas about what Cinder should do next. Ideas that left her some choices for the rest of her life. I'm in. She started. You are? Sure. This is the biggest unsolved mystery of the Third Era. There's got to be someone out there offering a reward for finding this princess, right? Yeah, Queen Lavanna. Thorn tilted toward her, nudging her with his elbow. In that case, we already have something in common with the princess, don't we? He winked, setting Cinder's nerves on edge. I just hope she's cute. Could you at least try to focus on the important things? That would be important. Thorn pulled himself up with a groan, still sore from all the rearranging. Hungry? I think there's a can of beans in there calling my name. No, I'm fine, thank you. When he had gone, Cinder hefted herself up onto the nearest crate and rolled out her shoulders. The news was still broadcasting on the screen, muted. A ticker read, Hunt continues for lunar fugitives Lynn Cinder and Crown Trader Dmitri Erland. Her throat constricted. Crown Trader? Yeah, I guess he would be considered a traitor now that Kai knows that he's a lunar. She shouldn't have been surprised. How long had she expected them to take them to figure out who had helped her escape? Cinder sank back onto her feet, dangling off the crate, and stared at the maze of pipes and bundled wires that cluttered the ship's rafters. Was she making a mistake by going to Europe? It was a draw she didn't think she could resist. Not only because of what Nancy had said, but because of Cinder's own jumbled memories too. She'd always known that she'd been adopted in Europe, and she had the faintest recollection of it. Only drug-muddled memories that she'd always thought might be part of a dream. A barn, a snow-covered field, a gray sky that never ended, and then a long train ride bringing her to New Beijing and her new family. She felt compelled to go there now, to figure out where she had been during all those years, and who had taken care of her. Who else knew her biggest secret? But what if she was only avoiding the inevitable? What if this was just a distraction to keep her from going to Dr. Erland and accepting her fate? At least the doctor could teach her how to be lunar, how to protect herself from Queen Levana. She didn't know how to use her glamour, not properly anyway. Pressing her lip, she held her cyborg hand over her face. Its metal plating shone almost mirror-like beneath the ship's dim lights. It was so pristine, so well crafted. It did not seem like her hand. Not yet. Tilting her head, Cinder held up her other, human hand beside it, and tried to imagine what it would be like to be fully human. 2 limbs made of skin and tissue and bones, blood pumping in faintly blue veins beneath the surface, all 10 fingernails. An electric current traipsed down her nerves, and her cyborg hand began to morph in her vision. Little wrinkles appeared in her knuckles, tendons stretched beneath her skin. The edges softened, warmed, turned to flesh. She was looking at 2 hands, 2 human hands. Small and dainty, with perfectly sculpted fingers and delicate, rounded nails. Oh, she's using her glamour on herself? She flexed the fingers of her left hand, forming a fist, then stretching them out again. An almost giddy laugh fell out of her. She was doing it. She was using her glamour. She did not need gloves anymore. She could convince everyone that this was real. No one would ever know she was cyborg again. The realization was stark and sudden and overwhelming. And then, too soon, an orange light flickered in the corner of her vision, her brain warning her that she was seeing a lie, that this was not real, would never be real. Oh, that's so freaking sad. She sat up with a gasp and squeezed her eyes shut before her retina scanner could start picking up on all the little inaccuracies and falsehoods like it had done with Levana's glamour when Cinder had begun to see through it. Could have used a comma in that one, Jesus. She was annoyed with herself, disgusted at how easily the desire had come to her. This was how Levana did it. She kept a hold on her people by tricking both their eyes and their hearts. She ruled with fear, yes, but also with adoration. It would be easy to abuse a person when they never recognized it as abuse. It would be easy to abuse a person when they never recognized it as abuse. It was not so different from when she'd glamored. Thorn. She'd owned his mind without even trying to, and he'd jumped at the chance to do her bidding. She sat shivering for a while, listening to Thorn banging around in the galley and humming to himself. If this was her chance to decide who she was, who she wanted to be, then the first decision was an easy one. She would never be like Queen Levana. Sad, though! For a moment, she thought she could be normal, and then she can't even have that? That's sad. She should go talk to Dr. Erlon, though. That should be her first priority, but also you have to have the story moving forward so she sees Scarlet. I wonder what's going to happen when they all meet. And wonder if she's going to be able to get the ship back into the back onto the planet. I wonder if Aika will get to be an escort droid. I'm glad Thorn is so willing, but is he going to simp even harder when he finds out that she's Princess Celine? Or is he going to be like, ew, you're lunar, you're gross? Hard to tell. Let's see. Chapter 20. The track's magnets had gone silent, replaced with the sound of their own footsteps in the brush and the caws of migrating birds. Only a suggestion of sun filtered down through the thick tree cover, and the forest smelled of tree sap and the coming of autumn. Time seemed to stretch on for eons, although Scarlet's port screen indicated that not even an hour had passed when they came across the stopped train. Scarlet first noticed sounds that didn't belong to the forest, the crunching of treads on dirt and gravel as dozens of androids circled the perimeter. Wolf abandoned the tracks, pushing through the brush and leading them into the security of the woods. Scarlet tucked away the port so she could use both hands to climb fallen logs and keep twigs and spiderwebs out of her hair. After a while, she tugged her hood over her head, lessening her vision but feeling better protected from the things that reached and jabbed at her. They climbed up an embankment, using the roots of a pine tree that looked about to topple over onto the tracks. On higher ground, Scarlet could see the dappled glint of sunlight off the train's metal roof. The occasional passenger cast a shadow against the windows. Cinder could not imagine being among them. Scarlet could not imagine being among them. Surely everyone knew what the medical emergency was by now. How long would it take to test every passenger for the plague and determine who could be let go? How long could they keep healthy people quarantined? Or would they let them go at all? To prevent escapees, a small army of androids patrolled around the train, their yellow sensors shuffling over the windows and doors, occasionally darting toward the forest. Though Scarlet didn't think they could see her so high above the tracks, she nevertheless crept back from the embankment and slowly unzipped her hoodie. Wolf glanced back just as she was pulling her arms from the sleeves, glad she was wearing a much more camouflage-worthy black tank top underneath. She cinched the hoodie tight around her waist. "Better?" she mouthed, but Wolf only glanced. "They'll have noticed we're missing," he whispered. The nearest android spun toward them, and Scarlet ducked, worried that even her hair could draw attention. When the android rolled away again, Wolf slinked forward, holding back a tree branch for Scarlet to pass beneath. They moved at a tractor's pace, crouched low to keep out of sight. It seemed every step Scarlet took sent another creature scurrying away for cover. A squirrel, a tiny swallow, and she feared that the androids would be able to track them by the disturbed wildlife alone, but no warning alarm came from the tracks. They stopped only once, when a streak of blue light danced on the trunks over their heads. Scarlet followed Wolf's lead and pressed herself nearly to the ground, listening to the pounding of her heart and the rush of adrenaline in her ears. With a start, she felt Wolf's warm fingers pressing into her back. They were steady against her, calming, as she watched the android's light scan back and forth, darting into the forest canopy. She risked the slightest tilt of her head until she could see Wolf beside her, immobile, every muscle taut, except the fingers of his other hand, which were tapping, tapping, tapping against a large rock, expelling the nervous energy that had nowhere else to go. She watched the fingers, half mesmerized, and didn't realize that the light had flickered away until the pressure of Wolf's touch lifted from her back. They prowled on. Soon the train was behind them, the noise of lost civilization fading in the chatter of crickets and toads, where Wolf seemed satisfied they weren't being followed. When Wolf seemed satisfied they weren't being followed, he led them out of the forest and back down to the tracks. Despite the growing distance between them and the train, neither spoke. Just as the sun was kissing the horizon, almost blindingly bright in those rare moments when it could be glimpsed through the trees, Wolf stopped and turned back. Scarlet halted a few steps ahead of him and followed his gaze, but she saw nothing but overgrown sticker bushes and long shadows that had no end. Her ears were perked, listening for another howl, but she couldn't pick up anything but bird chatter and, overhead, the squeaks of a colony of bats. "More wolves?" she finally asked. A long silence, followed by a terse nod. "More wolves." It wasn't until he started walking again that Scarlet released a capture of breath. They'd been walking for hours without sign of another train, a cross-section of tracks or civilization. On one hand, it was beautiful here. The fresh air, the wildflowers, the critters that came to the edge of the brush to watch Scarlet and Wolf before scurrying back into the ferns. But on the other hand, her feet and back were sore. Her stomach was growling, and now Wolf was telling her that the less lovable creatures of the forest were prowling nearby. A chill rushed up her arms. Untying her hoodie from her waist, she tugged it back on and yanked the zipper over the neck. Pulling out her port screen, she deflated to see that they had gone a mere 18 miles, and they had another 30 to go before they reached the nearest train station. "There's a junction coming up in about half a mile." "Good," said Wolf. Whatever trains are scheduled to come through on these tracks won't be making it through anytime soon. We should start seeing some of the trains after the junction. And when this train comes, she said, how do you plan on getting us onto it? Same way we got off the other one. He sent a sly grin toward her. Like jumping off a barn, was it? She glared. The comparison doesn't work as well for jumping back onto a train. His response was that same teasing smile, and Scarlet turned away, thinking that maybe she didn't want to know what his plan was, so long as she had one. A late flowering shrub trembled just off the path as Scarlet's heart thumped, until a harmless pine martin crawled out and disappeared into the trees. She sighed, annoyed at her restlessness. So, she said, disrupting Wolf in another backward glance, who would win in the fight, you or a pack of wolves? He frowned at her, all seriousness. Depends, he said slowly, like he was trying to figure out her motive for asking. How big is the pack? I don't know. What's normal? 6? I could win against 6, he said. Any more than that, and it would be a close call. Scarlet smirked. You're not in danger of low self-esteem, at least. What do you mean? Not at all. She kicked a stone from her path. How about you and a lion? A cat? A cat? A cat. Don't insult me. She laughed, the sound sharp and surprising. How about the bear? Why, do you see one out there? Not yet, but I want to be prepared in case I have to rescue you. The smile she'd been waiting for warmed his face, a glint of white teeth flashing. I'm not sure. I've never had to fight a bear before. He cocked his head toward the east. There's a lake that way, maybe 100 yards. We should refill the water. Wait. Wolf paused, glanced at her. Scarlet's brow was creased as she inched toward him. Do that again. He took a half step back, eyes glinting with sudden nerves. Do what? Smile. The order was met with the opposite response. Wolf shrank back, his jaw tense, as if to be sure his lips stayed locked together. Scarlet hesitated only a moment before reaching for him. He winced, but didn't move as she cupped his chin and gently pulled open his lips with her thumb. He took in a hissing breath before touching his tongue to the point of his right tooth. But they were not normal. They were almost fang-like, with sharp, elongated canines. She realized too slowly they were like wolf teeth. Wolf turned his face away, locking his jaw again. His whole body stayed tense, uncomfortable. She saw him gulp. Implants? He scratched the back of his neck, unable to look at her. That order of the pack sure takes this wolf thing oh, fuck. That order of the pack sure takes this wolf thing seriously, don't they? Finding her hand still hovering in midair, her fingers dangerously close to tilting Wolf's face back toward her. She let it fall and tucked it into her front pocket. Her heart was suddenly racing. So what other oddities should I know about? A tail, perhaps? Finally, he met her gaze, flushed with insult until he found her smiling up at him. I'm joking, she said, offering an apologetic grin. They're only teeth. At least they're not implanted on your scalp like that guy at the fights had. It took a moment, but soon his embarrassment started to melt. His scowl softened around the edges. His lips turned up again, but it was not another true smile. She nudged his foot with her toes. All right, I'll accept that smile for now. You said you heard the river nearby? Seemingly grateful to be released from the conversation, Wolf ducked back from her. A lake, he said. I can smell it. Scarlet squinted in the direction he gestured, seeing nothing but more trees, the same old trees. Of course you can, she said, following as he pushed into the undergrowth. And he was right. Though it was more a pond than a lake, kept fresh by a creek that flowed in and out the far side, the shore changed from grass to rocks before disappearing beneath the surface, and a cluster of beech trees hung their branches toward the water. Rolling up her sleeves, Scarlet splashed some water on her face and slurped up big handfuls. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was until she found that she couldn't stop drinking it. Wolf busied himself, dunking his hands and placing his wet fingers through his hair, making it stand in each direction as if he'd gotten too tame during the trek. Refreshed, Scarlet sat back on her heels and glanced across at Wolf. I don't believe it. He met her gaze. Your hands aren't twitching, she said, gesturing at the palm set loosely on his knee. It instantly flexed into a fist, his fingers uncomfortable beneath her scrutiny. Maybe the forest is having a good effect on you. Wolf seemed to consider this, his brow drawn as he topped off the water bottle and nestled into the bag. Maybe so, he said. Then, is there any more food? No, I didn't realize we'd be living off our own reserves, Scarlet laughed. Now that you mention it, here I am thinking the fresh air must be working a miracle when you're probably just suffering from low blood sugar. Come on, maybe we'll find maybe we'll come across some wild berries or something. She moved to stand when she heard quacking on the other side of the lake. Half a dozen ducks were making their way to the water, paddling out and dipping their heads beneath the surface. Scarlet bit her lip. Or do you think you could catch one of those? As he shifted his attention to the ducks, a daring grin spread across his face. He made it look easy, prowling up to the unsuspecting birds like a born predator. But if Scarlet was impressed, and perhaps she was, it was nothing compared to his awe as he watched her defeather the dead fowl like a trained expert, pricking holes in its skin to allow for the outer layer of fat to drain out while it cooked. The trickiest part was lighting a fire, but with a quick search on her port screen and a clever use of gunpowder from one of the gun's cartridges, Scarlet was soon mesmerized by the gray plume of small, free fire winding their way toward the forest canopy. Wolf's attention was off in the woods as he stretched out his long legs in front of him. How long have you lived on the farm? He asked, digging his heels into the dirt. Scarlet settled her elbows over her knees and stared impatiently at the duck. Since I was 7. Why did you leave Paris? She peered up at him, but his attention was caught on the tranquil water. I was miserable, Jer. After my mom left, my dad preferred to spend his time at the bar instead of with me, so I came to live with Grandmia. And were you happier there? She shrugged. It took some getting used to. I went from being a pretty spoiled city kid to getting up at dawn and being expected to finish my chores. I had my share of rebellions, but it wasn't the same. When I lived with my dad, I used to throw fits and tantrums, break things and make up stories and anything I could just to get his attention, to get him to care. But I never did any of that with Grandmia, who would sit in the garden on warm nights and just talk. And she would actually listen to what I had to say. She treated my opinions like they were valid, like I had something worthwhile to say. Her eyes fogged as she stared into the ashes beneath the flames. Half the time, we'd end up fighting with each other, because we both have such strong opinions, and are too stubborn to ever admit we're wrong about doing something, or ever wrong about something. But there would always reach this point, every single time, when one of us would be yelling, or just ready to stomp away and slam the door, and then my grandma would just start laughing. And then, of course, I would start laughing, and she'd say that I was just like her. She gulped, tightening her arms around her knees. She'd say that I was bound to have a tough life, because I was just like her. Scarlet rubbed her palm against her lashes, smearing away the tears before they could fall. Wolf waited for her breath to steady before asking, Was it always just the two of you? She nodded, and when she was sure she'd stifled the tears, peeled her hands away. She sniffed and reached forward to flip the wings, their skin already blackened. Yep, just the two of us. Grandmia never married. Whatever my grandpa is, he's been out of the picture for a long time. She never really talked about it. And you didn't have any siblings or adopted siblings? Hold the phone. He knows. He knows. Yo. Yo, 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 yo. And you didn't have any siblings or adopted siblings? Wards? Wolf knows. That makes sense because we know that he is with the wolf pack. Oh, shit. So then he's surprised. So then what the fuck? So does he just not care? Does he not care about the whole fucking thing? Because his whole thing is that he's supposed to be finding Celine. That was the whole fucking deal. So if he knows that it was her grandma, so is he surprised? What the fuck? He knows. He knows that Celine was with Michel Benoit. And that so he's shocked to hear that she didn't have any siblings growing up. Meaning that he knows now that Cinder is somewhere else. Warts? Scarlet swiped her sleeve across her nose and squinted at him. No, it was just me. She added a branch to the fire. How about you? Any siblings? Wolf curled his fingers into the rocks. One, a younger brother. Scarlet barely heard him over the crackle of the flames. She felt the weight of those 3 words. A younger brother. Wolf's expression showed neither affection nor coldness. He struck her as someone who would be protective of a younger sibling, but his face seemed hardened against that instinct. Where's she now? Does he still live with your parents? Leaning forward, Wolf adjusted the nearest duck leg. No. Neither of us has spoken to our parents in a very long time. Scarlet refocused on the cooking bird. Not getting along with your parents. I guess that's something we have in common, then. Wolf's grip locked around the drumstick, and only when a spark lanced out at him from the fire did he retract his arm. I loved my parents, he said with the tenderness that had been missing when he'd mentioned his brother. Oh, she said dumbly. Are they dead? She flinched at her crudeness, wishing just once she knew when to hold her tongue. But Wolf seemed more resigned than hurt as he picked through the rocks beside him. I don't know. There are rules that come with being a member of the pack. One is that you cut all ties with people from your past, including your family. Especially your family. She shook her head, baffled. But if you had a good home life, why did you ever join them in the first place? I wasn't given a choice, he scratched behind his ear. My brother wasn't given one either when they came for him. A few years after they took me, but that never seemed to bother him like it bothered me. He trailed off, tossing a stone into the water. It's complicated, and it doesn't matter anymore. She frowned. It was unfathomable to her that you wouldn't have a choice to live that lifestyle, to leave your home and family, to join a violent gang. But before she could press him any further, Wolf's attention swiveled back toward the train tracks, and he leapt to his feet. Scarlet turned, her heart landing in her throat. The man from the dining car crept out of the shadows. Oh, I don't like this. The man from the dining car crept out of the shadows, quiet as a cat. He was still smiling, but it was nothing like that teasing, flirtatious grin she'd seen on him before. It took her a slow, blank moment to recall his name. Ron. Tipping his head back, Ron sniffed longingly in the air. Lovely, he said. It seems I'm just in time for supper. Oh, shit! I knew he was going to come back! Oh, fuck! He jumped off the train with them! Or, I don't know if he jumped off with the train with them, but he knew! He fucking knew that they jumped off the train! Yo! Yo! Okay! Yo! For a second, I thought I had not hit the record button again. I was going to be upset. So what does Ron want with them? What does Ron... What is... What does fucking... What does Ron want with Wolf? Because it has to be Wolf, unless he's also one of the LSOPs, leader soldier, or loyal soldier to the Order of the Pack. But would he be? Well, it would make sense if he was, because then that explains why Wolf can smell him. I don't know. I'm a little worried. Just a little. But yo though, but yo though, but yo though, but yo though, but yo though. My God! It's getting tense. We're meeting some actual conflict now. Actual conflict. I'm sorry if I've interrupted you, Ron said, lingering beneath the forest canopy. The scent was simply too enticing to pass up. His eyes were on Wolf as he said this, and the twinkle behind them made Scarlet's toes curl in her shoes. Grasping the handle of her pistol, she dragged it in toward her hip. Of course, Wolf said after a long silence, his voice dark with warning. We have plenty. Thank you, friend. Thank you. No, that's how... Thank you, friend. The man walked around the fire, passing by so close to Scarlet that she had to shrink away to keep her elbow from brushing his leg. The hairs stood up on her forearms. Ron sprawled out opposite the fire from her, lounging as if the shore were his own private beach. After a moment, Wolf settled down between them, not lounging. Wolf, this is Ron, said Scarlet, flushing from the awkwardness. I met him on the train. Wishing she could restructure her emotions into nonchalance, she busied her hands with turning the duck pieces. Wolf inched closer to her, keeping himself as a block between her and Ron, even though his face was tinged red from being so close to the flames. We had a lovely conversation in the dining car, said Ron, about... what was it? Righteous lupine wannabes? Scarlet glared at him. A topic that never ceases to fascinate me, she said, tone even as she pulled the duck wings and legs out of the pit. These are done. She took a drumstick for herself and handed the other to Wolf. Ron didn't complain about the two bony wings, and Scarlet grimaced when he'd pulled the first apart, cartilage popping loudly at the joints. Bon appetit, Ron said, picking at the meat with his eerily sharp nails, juices dripping down his arms. They oozed. Anyway. Scarlet nibbled at the meat, while her two companions attacked their shares like animals, each keeping a wary eye on the other. She leaned forward. Hold on. He had sharp nails, eerily sharp nails. So we know that Wolf is the leader of the pack thing. We know that they're like wolf hybrids. Is there owl hybrids or otherwise bird hybrids? That'd be cool. Because they said his sharp nails just make me think of talons. So, Ron, how did you get away from the train? Ron tossed the clean bones of one wing into the lake. I might ask you the same. She pretended that her heart wasn't pulsating erratically. We jumped. Risky, said Ron with a smirk. Wolf bristled. The relaxation that had graced his features before was gone, replaced by the simmering tempers Scarlet had seen at the street fight. The tapping fingers, the jostling foot. We're still a long way from Paris, said Ron, ignoring Scarlet's question. How unfortunate this turn of events has been. For the plague victim, of course. I'm like trying to figure out Ron's voice as he talks. He's with some grandiose, but also... But he's not French, explicitly anyway, so... Scarlet adjusted the breast meat. It's awful. I'm grateful that Wolf was with me, or I'd probably still be stuck there. Wolf, said Ron, enunciating it very carefully. What an unusual name. Did your parents give it to you? Doesn't matter, said Wolf, tossing away his bone. I'm only making conversation. I'd prefer silence, Wolf said, a growl in his tone. After a moment in which the distrust was palpable between them, Ron faked a gasp. I'm so sorry, he said, picking the last bit of meat from the bones. Have I stumbled upon a honeymoon? What a lucky man you are. His face taunted as he pushed the shredded meat into his mouth. Wolf curled his fingers into the sand. Squinting at the man through the haze of smoke and heat, Scarlet leaned forward. Is it my imagination, or do you two know each other? Neither denied it. Wolf's face was pinned to Ron, a twitch away from attacking him. Suspicion sliced through Scarlet's thoughts, and she gripped the gun. Roll up your sleeve. I beg your pardon, said Ron, licking the juices as they dripped down his wrist. Clambering to her feet, she leveled the barrel at him. Now! He hesitated only a moment, his expression unreadable. He reached for his left wrist and rolled the sleeve past his elbow. LSOP 1126 was tattooed across the muscle of his forearm. Oh, fuck, I knew it. I knew it. He had to be a fucking a pack soldier, the same way that Ron was. It makes the only fucking sense because that's the same way that Wolf is, because that's the only way that Wolf would be able to smell him and know who the fuck he is. That's why it's like, who have you been talking to? Oh my god, but is Ron looking for Wolf? Is Ron looking for Scarlet and following orders? What the fuck is happening? Oh my god, this book is so fucking good. Anger boiled up inside Scarlet, every bit as hot as the coals beneath the fire. Why didn't you tell me he was one of them? She hissed without taking her focus off the gun or off the tattoo. Or taking her focus or the gun off the tattoo. For the first time, Ron's composure stiffened. I was hoping to determine why he's here and why he'd approach you on the train without alarming you, said Wolf. Scarlet, this is Ran Kesley, a loyal soldier to the Order of the Pack. Don't worry, he's only an Omega. Brown's nose wrinkled at what Scarlet could tell had been a low insult. She swapped her attention between the two. You could smell him on me, she said. When I came back to the car, you knew, and you knew he was following us all this time. How? She gaped at Wolf, the unnatural eyes, the uncanny senses, the teeth, the howls, the idea that he'd never had a tomato before. Who are you people? Hurt flinched across Wolf's face, but it was Ron who spoke. What exactly have you told her, brother? Wolf stood, forcing Ron to tilt back his head to hold his stare. She knows I'm no longer a brother to you, he said, and she knows that no one with that mark can be trusted. Ron smiled at the irony. Is that all? I know you have my grandmother! She yelled, startling a flock of swallows out of the nearest tree. Once their flapping had gone quiet, the woods settled into a thick hush, Scarlet's words still ringing. Her hand started to shake, and she forced it to be still, though Ron continued to sit sprawled and at ease on the shore. You have my grandmother, she said, more slowly this time. Don't you? Well, not with me. White sparks flashed across Scarlet's vision, and it took all her willpower not to pull the trigger and erase his smugness. Why are you following us? She said when the throbbing rage had become a manageable simmer. She could see him calculating his response, planting his palm on the rocky shore. Ron pushed himself to standing and brushed the dirt from his hands. I've been sent to retrieve my brother, he said, as casually as if he'd been sent to the store for milk and bread. Perhaps he did not tell you that he and I are part of an elite pack, given special assignment. That assignment has been cancelled, and Master Yael, it's Jael, Jael, wants us to return. All of us. Scarlet's stomach tightened at Ron's meaningful look, but Wolf's expression was filled with more distrust and shadows than it had ever been. I'm not coming back, he said. Jael no longer controls me. Ron sniffed. I doubt that, and you know as well as anyone that we don't allow our brothers to leave us. He rolled his sleeve down over the tattoo. Though I confess, I haven't missed having one less alpha around. The wind shifted, sending sparks from the fire into Scarlet's face, and she stumbled back, blinking them away. Do you really think it wise to come here without Jael to protect you? Said Wolf. I don't need Jael's protection. That would be a first. With a snarl, Ron leapt forward, but Wolf danced out of his reach and retaliated with a fist aimed at Ron's jaw. Ron blocked, grasping Wolf's fist and using the momentum to spin Wolf around and lock his elbow around Wolf's neck. Wolf reached back, grasped Ron's shoulder, and flipped Ron over. Ron landed with a solid grunt, his feet smacking the water. He was up again in a blink. Scarlet's hand trembled. The gun danced between the two, her pulse galloping. Ron was shaking with smothered rage, while Wolf was carved from rock, shrewd and calculating. I really do think it's time for you to return, brother, Ron said through clenched teeth. Wolf shook his head. No, I think like Ron would have a lot more growl in his voice. I really do think... No, I don't want... I really No, not too. More. Because it's... I really... No, what am I... I really do think it's time for you to return, brother. No, it's not. It's not Yoda. I really do think it's time for you to return, brother. I really do think it's time for you to return, brother. Yeah, we'll go extra deep on it. Fuck it. Wolf shook his head, damp spikes of hair flopping onto his forehead. You were never a match for me. I think you'll find me somewhat improved, Alpha. Yeah, but he's Omega, so he kind of has like a softer... I really do think you'll find me somewhat improved, Alpha. And we're back at the voice I gave him with, whatever. Wolf snorted, and Scarlet sensed he didn't believe Ron could ever be a genuine opponent. Is that why you followed us? You saw your chance to improve your rank? Oh, fuck. This Wolf talking. Is that why you followed us? You saw your chance to improve your rank? To defeat me away from the pack? I told you why I'm here. Giles sent for you. The assignment is cancelled. And when he finds out about this rebellion of yours... Wolf launched at Ron, knocking him onto his back. Ron's head landed in the water, and Scarlet heard a sickening crunch as it collided with the hard stones beneath the surface. She screamed and ran toward them, digging her nails into Wolf's arm. No, stop! He might be able to tell us something! Wolf's sharp canines were bared as he pulled a fist back and landed a punch to Ron's face. Wolf! Stop it! My grandmother! He knows about... Wolf! Let him go! Don't eat chili before you read a book. When he didn't relent, Scarlet fired a warning shot into the air. The echo filled the clearing, but Wolf was unfazed. Ron's arm stopped flailing, slipped weakly down Wolf's forearms, and dropped into the water. You're going to kill him! Wolf! Wolf! I can't do a shriek. As a last burst of bubbles rose up from Ron's mouth, Scarlet stepped back, let out a breath, and pulled the trigger again. Wolf hissed and fell onto his side. He clasped his hand over his left arm, where blood was already seeping into the cloth of his sleeve. But it wasn't a deep wound. A bullet had barely grazed him. He blinked up at Scarlet. Did you just shoot me? You didn't leave me much choice! 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 With ringing ears, Scarlet fell to her knees and heaved Ron up by his shoulders, laying him back down at an awkward angle on the shore. He rolled onto his side, left eye swelling shut, and watered-down blood dripping down his nose and jaw. With a rattling cough, more blood and water spilled out of his mouth, puddling onto the sand. Releasing a strangled breath, Scarlet glanced back up at Wolf. He hadn't moved, but his expression had shed the maniacal anger from something akin to admiration. When you greeted me with the gun on your doorstep, he said, it's nice to know you meant it. Scarlet scowled at him. Honestly, Wolf, what are you thinking? He could tell us something. He could help get my grandma back. His half smile softened, and for a moment he looked sorry. For her. He won't talk. How do you know? I know. That's not a good enough answer. Watch your gun. Watch your gun. What? She dropped her gaze to the shore beside her, just in time to see Ron wrap his fingers around the gun's handle. She grasped the barrel and snatched it away from him. An exhausted chuckle brought more bloodied spittle onto Ron's lips. I will kill you one day, brother, if Jael doesn't first. Stop provoking him! Scarlet yelled. Climbing to her feet, out of Ron's reach, she reset the safety and shoved the gun back into the waist of her jeans. You're not exactly in any position to be making these threats right now anyway. Ron said nothing. His eyes had closed, his lips left hanging open with a smear of blood on his cheek, taking in slow, rattling breaths. Disgusted, she turned back to Wolf, watching as he peeled his hand away from his wound and stared with surprise at the blood coating his palm. He leaned over on his elbow and swished his hand around in the water to get the stain off. With a sigh, she scrambled to her forgotten bag and pulled out a small first aid kit. Wolf didn't argue as she ripped open the tear in his sleeve caused by the bullet and took over the job of washing and bandaging the wound. The bullet had just grazed his bicep. "I'm sorry I shot you," she said, "but you were going to kill him." "I still might," Wolf said, washing her hands. She shook her head, taping off the bandage. "He's not your real brother, is he? That's just a gang thing, right?" Wolf grunted, said nothing. "Wolf!" I never said we got along." Scarlet peered up at the wild contempt filling Wolf's face. His green eyes were burning, staring at Ron's prone body behind her. "Good!" The ferocity in her voice startled away some of his hatred, and Wolf turned his attention back to her. "You must know his weaknesses. You'll know how best to question him." That sympathetic look again. "We're trained to withstand questioning. He won't help us." "But he's already given us some information." Packing up the remains of the kit, she tossed it toward her bag. It missed the opening and slid down to the ground. "He obviously knew something when I asked about my grandma. And then this assignment that was cancelled. What was that about? Does it have something to do with her?" Wolf shook his head, but she detected a clouding in his eyes. "He told us what he wanted me, to know, or to believe. I wouldn't put any stock into any of it." "How can you be sure?" His fingers started up again. Clench, release, clench, release. "I know Ron. He would do anything to improve his standing. By tracking me down and forcing me to return, or even showing proof that he'd fought me and won. He hoped to do just that. As for the assignment I'd been a part of when I left, they wouldn't cancel it. It's too important to them." "What about my grandmother?" He shook off a troubled frown. "Right. We should keep moving." He tested the strength of his injured arm before using it to push himself to his feet. The fire had burned down to smoldering coals, and soon he had stamped them out, ignoring the duck breast that shriveled up onto a chunk of coal. "That's not what I meant," said Scarlet, staying put on the shore. "Shouldn't we at least try to question him?" "Scarlet, listen to me. Does he know something that would help? Yes, probably. But he won't give it to us, unless you plan on torturing it out of him. And even then, there's nothing you could do that would frighten him more than what the pack will do if he talks. We already know where your grandmother is. Dealing with him is a waste of time." "What if we brought him with us and offered him a trade?" she suggested, watching Wolf reload their bag. Wolf laughed. "A trade? For an Omega?" He gestured at Ron. "He's worth nothing." Though his temper could be heard just beneath the surface, Scarlet was glad that the temporary insanity was gone from his eyes. "He'll go back to them and tell them you're with me." "Doesn't matter." Slinging the pack over his shoulder, Wolf spared a final scornful look at his brother. "We'll get there before he does." Okay, so it's his brother. It's his brother. It's his brother. All right, hang on. Now, I'm a fan of the classic trope of, oh, I have an evil twin brother or some shit like that. Okay, so I dig this. His brother's an Omega and he's the Alpha. That's so funny because typically in those things, I was going to expect his brother to be the Alpha and then him the Omega, and he's trying to be stronger. But I don't know. Oh my God. And then she shot him. She shot him in the arm. That's so badass. And like she knows. Okay, so the fact that she only grazed him, no, that she knows how to shoot. Any shot that she takes, she's willingly choosing her targets. She grazed him on purpose. And it's funny, she softened her feelings toward him because she would have just shot him point blank at the beginning, and now she wants to keep him safe. Ah! What about Granmere? Ah! Okay, all right. And then we go into the forest, chapter 22! Night crept up fast. The forest leaned in toward them, a solid wall of shadows beneath the dim spotlight of a waning moon. They'd only passed one junction and continued wordlessly north. Seeing another set of tracks combining with theirs had given Scarlet a beat of hope. At least now there was a chance of crossing paths with the new train. But the maglev tracks remained silent. Scarlet's port screen light was enough to see by for a time, but she worried about killing the battery and knew she should probably stop soon. Wolf was no longer looking back every few minutes, and Scarlet suspected he'd known they were being followed all along. Wolf stopped suddenly, and Scarlet's heart leaped. For a moment, she'd heard wolves again. Here. Here. This will work. He peered upward at a log that had fallen across the embankments on either side of them, creating a bridge over the tracks. What do you think? Scarlet followed him through the waist-high brush. I thought maybe you were kidding before. You really think you can jump onto a moving train from there? He nodded. Without breaking a leg? Or anything else. He met her speculative look with a hint of arrogance. She shrugged. Anything to be out of these woods. The ledge was a few feet over her head, but she clambered up with little trouble, grasping onto roots and jutting rocks. She heard a hiss from below, and turned to see a shot of pain cross Wolf's face as he hauled himself up after her. She held her breath, feeling guilty as he dusted off his hands. Let me see, she said, grasping Wolf's forearm and holding up her port screen to shine light on the bandage. No blood had leaked through yet. I really am sorry about shooting you. Are you? Her touch lingered as it reached the end of the bandage, checking that it was still securely tied. What does that mean? I suspect you would shoot me all over again if you thought it would help your grandmother. She blinked at him, almost surprised to discover how close they were standing. I would, she said, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't be sorry about it afterwards. I'm just glad you didn't take my advice and shoot me in the head, he said, his teeth showing in the port screen's brightness. His fingers barely fluttered across her sweater's pocket, making her jump. Then his fingers were gone, and Wolf was squinting against the bright light of the port screen. Sorry, Scarlet stammered, angling it toward the ground. Wolf moved around her, pressing on the fallen log with his foot. It appears trustworthy. Scarlet discovered a strange irony in his choice of words. Wolf, she said, testing the way her voice echoed in the forest's emptiness. He stiffened, but he didn't turn around. When you first told me about leaving the pack, I thought maybe it had been months or even years, but Ron made it sound like you'd just left. One hand came to ruffle his hair as he turned back toward her. Wolf? It's been 3 weeks, he whispered. Then, less than 3 weeks. He sucked in a breath, held it, released it all at once. About the time my grandmother disappeared. He ducked his head, unable to meet her gaze. Scarlet shivered. You told me that you were a nobody, barely more than an errand boy, but Ron called you an alpha. Isn't that a pretty high rank? She saw his chest rise with a slow, tense breath. And now you tell me that you left them around the same time my grandmother was kidnapped. He rubbed absently at the tattoo, still saying nothing. Scarlet waited, blood beginning to simmer, until he dared to look at her. The port screen cast a wash of bluish-white light at their feet, but it did little to illuminate them. In the dark, she could see only the vaguest outline of his cheekbones and jaw, his hair like a clump of pine needles sticking out from his scalp. You told me you had no idea why they would take my grandmother. But that was a lie, wasn't it? Scarlet. So what was true? Did you really leave them, or is this all some story to get me to... She gasped, stumbled back. Her thoughts turned, a cascade of doubts and questions rushing through them. Am I the mission Ron was talking about? The one that was supposedly cancelled? No. And after my dad warned me about this, he said one of you would come for me, and there you were. And I even knew you were one of them. I knew I couldn't trust you, and I still let myself believe... Scarlet, stop. She wrapped her fist around her hood's cords, tightening them against her throat. Her heart was pulsating now, blood running hot beneath her skin. She heard Wolf inhale, saw his hands spread out in the beam of the port screen. You're right. I lied to you about not knowing why they took your grandmother, but you aren't the mission that Ron was talking about. She tilted the port upward, shining it into his face. Wolf flinched, but he didn't look away. But it has something to do with my grandmother. But it has something to do with my grandmother. It has everything to do with your grandmother. She bit down hard on her lower lip, trying to still the tide of rage rising inside her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I knew that if I told you, you wouldn't trust me. I know I should have anyway, but I couldn't. The hand holding her port began to shake. Tell me everything. There was a long pause. A sickeningly long pause. You're going to despise me, he murmured. His chest sank in, trying to make himself small again, like he had in the alleyway in the headlights of her ship. Scarlet pressed her hands so hard onto her hips her bones began to ache. Oh, shit. Ron and I were both in the pack sent to retrieve your grandmother. Oh my god! What? What is that? What the fuck? Scarlet's stomach curdled. The pack sent to retrieve her. I wasn't with them when she was taken, he added quickly. As soon as we arrived in Rio, I saw my chance to escape. I knew I could disappear there without the grid of the city to find me, so I took it. That was the morning she was taken. He crossed his arms like he was protecting himself from her hatred. I could have stopped them. I was stronger than all of them. I could have kept it from happening. I could have warned her, or you, but I didn't. I just ran. Scarlet's eyes started to burn, inhaling sharply. She turned her back on him, tilting her head up toward the black sky to keep the sudden tears in without having to swipe at them. She waited until she was sure she could speak before pivoting back toward him. And that's when you started going to the fights. And the tavern, he said with a nod. And then what? You felt guilty, so you thought you'd follow me around for a while? Maybe help out on the farm? Like that would make up for it? He winced. Of course not. I knew that getting mixed up with you would be suicide, that eventually they would find me if I didn't leave Rio. But you. He seemed frustrated with the words that wouldn't come. I couldn't just leave. Scarlet heard the crunch of plastic and forced her grip to loosen on the port screen. Why did they take her? What do they want with her? He opened his mouth but was silent. Scarlet raised both eyebrows. Her pulse was thundering. Well? They're trying to find Princess Celine. The ringing in her ears made her think for a moment she hadn't heard him correctly. They're trying to find who? The Lunar Princess Celine. Oh, this revealed why they took fucking Grandmama? Grandmama? Who helped smuggle the moon baby? Ah! She drew back. It occurred to her that maybe Wolf was playing some kind of cruel joke, but his expression was too serious, too horrified. What? He started to sway uncomfortably from foot to foot. They've been searching for the princess for years, and they've been searching for the princess for years, and then believe your grandmother has information on her whereabouts. Scarlet squinted at him, baffled. Sure she misunderstood. Sure she must be mistaken. But Wolf's attention held her, penetrating and sure. Why would my grandmother... She shook her head. The Lunar Princess is dead! There's evidence that she'd survived the fire, and that someone rescued her and brought her to Earth, said Wolf. And Scarlet. What? Are you sure your grandma doesn't know anything? Her jaw hung for so long her tongue turned dry and sticky in her mouth. She's a farmer! She lived in France her whole life. How would she know anything? She was in the military before she was a farmer. She traveled then. That was 20 years ago! How long's the princess been missing? 10? 15 years? That doesn't even make sense! You can't discount it. Sure I can! What if she does know something? She frowned, but her disbelief faded upon seeing Wolf's growing desperation. Scarlet, he said. Ron said that the assignment had been called off. He could only have meant the search for the princess. I can't imagine why, after so many years. But if it's true, then it may mean they have no more use for your grandmother. A pang in her stomach. So they wouldn't let her go? Wrinkles formed around Wolf's lips. A weight dropped onto Scarlet's chest. He didn't need to speak for her to see his answer. No. No, they would not let her go. She sucked in a dizzying breath, dropping her attention to the streaks of moonlight on the tracks below. If I'd known, if I'd met you before, I want to help you, Scarlet. I want to try and make this better, but they want information that I don't have. The best thing for your grandmother is to be useful. Even if they have stopped looking for Celine, there may still be something she knows or something in her past, anything that would make her valuable to them. That's why, if there's anything you know, any information you may have, it's the best chance you have of saving her. You can barter for her. Give them the information they want. Her frustration nearly enveloped her. I don't know what they want. Think. Has there ever been anything suspicious? Anything your grandma has said or done that struck you as peculiar? She does peculiar things all the time. That's related to Lunars? Or the princess? No, She paused. I mean, she's always been more sympathetic to them than most people. She's not quick to judge. What else? Nothing. Nothing else. She has nothing to do with the Lunars. There's no evidence. Nothing to do with the Lunars. There's evidence that that's not true. What evidence? What are you talking about? Wolf scratched at his hair. She must have told you that she's been to Luna. What the fuck? Scarlet pressed her palms against her eyelids, sucking in a shaky breath. You're insane! Why would my grandmother go to Luna? Or have ever gone to Luna? She was part of the only diplomatic mission to be sent from Earth to Luna in the last 50 years. She was the pilot that brought the Earthen officials. The visit lasted almost 2 weeks. She must have had some interaction with Lunars. He frowned. She never told you any of this? No! No, she never told me any of this! When was this? Wolf looked away, and she could see his hesitation. Wolf, when was this? He gulped. 40 years ago, he said, his tone going quiet again. 9 months before your father was born. Now look, all right. I love a good plot twist. I'm always about a good plot twist because a good plot twist. Hey, hang on, fucking phone. A good plot twist really gets you. A good shake from expectation. Did Madame Benoit elope with the Lunar? And Scarlet's daddy is a moon man! What? What the fuck? What is this? He's a moon man? What? Scarlet's daddy's from the moon. He may have been your moon, but he wasn't your daddy. So that makes Scarlet part lunar. If she's the blood child of this guy. Well, no, because that would make her dad quarter lunar. Oh, no, excuse me, half lunar, and that would make a Scarlet quarter lunar. What the fuck? What? Gotta take up a wide area. Wolf was sent to kidnap Granny Benoit. Luc Benoit, her son, is part lunar. Maybe that's why she's always been sympathetic, because even though she, Madame Benoit, Granny Benoit, and Luc Benoit had their falling out, she's always been sympathetic to the Lunars because she likes them. She wound up at diplomatic mission, she hooked up with the Lunar, and it went from there. a lot to unpack. It's a lot to unpack. I hope you guys have a great day out there, man. I'm gonna have to think about this until the next recording. Anyway, be good. Keep reading. Have fun. Catch y'all next time. Do drugs.